Okay, we're back in the office today, and today I'm going to go over Mac Survival Guide. And basically what that is for software development, YouTube, etc. I'm going to show all the tools that I use day-to-day basis on the Mac to get work done. Okay, the first tool I'm going to go over is the iTerm2, which is the terminal program that I use. There is a terminal built into Mac. I don't typically use it. The combination of iTerm2 and OMyZSH, you can look that up on the web and see how to install that. For those of y'all don't know, most modern Macs are using ZSH. A little bit different style, and the big thing that I have installed is integrations for like Git and PHP Artisan, Composer, etc. So it just kind of shortens your command path. And the cool thing is, if you have that installed and have it all working, generally when you load up IntelliJ or another tool that opens up a terminal, you also add that functionality of those as well. So we'll kind of get started here. Obviously, this is where you're going to use your brew commands. I'm using Homebrew. You can look online to download that. Pretty much every day starts off with your normal brew update, brew upgrade, are the most common things. Brew Doctor will help you if you've got something messed up and you can't get back to it, or something's not updating or something's not working in Homebrew. The nice thing I like about Homebrew is it basically keeps everything contained to a single directory, and you can go in that directory and blow it away and start from scratch. It's not like Linux where basically it's throwing bin files and configuration files all over your file system. It's keeping it nice and contained, where you can start over if you need to, or easily remove or add something if you need to. iTerm really doesn't have a lot of settings that I mess with per se. If we go in here and go to preferences, a couple of things you may want to change is obviously your scroll back, how far it will let you scroll back up, if you're looking at long log files. Other than that, I really don't change a lot of settings. A couple of things that will help you out in any of the applications I'm getting ready to show you is actually knowing what the key bindings are. This spot, I see a lot of folks, especially if they're just getting into computing in general, they really get focused on using the mouse way more than they should. Keystrokes are generally faster for most things, so once you memorize a couple of them, it'll save you some time. Not much to iTerm. It's basically your normal terminal. You start it, stop it. iTerm is a little weird. It's unlike most Mac apps. It really wants to prevent you from shutting down your machine if you have it running. To shut it down completely, usually you have to actually go down to the icon and right click, or you can use an option command to quit iTerm. Just closing the window is just that terminal session, and iTerm's still running in the background. So our brew update's finished, and we're going to do a brew upgrade. This is pretty much like, this is your interface to Homebrew, typically is your terminal, so that's why I'm kind of showing them together. Okay, the next likely thing that you may be using is some type of Office product. I typically do not use Microsoft Office. I use the built-in Pages, Keynotes, and Numbers, and we'll go over Pages real quick. So this is just one of the templates that's there. And my experience, Pages is superior to Word, and that's just my personal opinion, and I've been doing this for a long time. It's more what you see, what you get. It's more intuitive, especially if you don't have a lot of Word experience. It's actually a lot easier to learn Pages if you haven't been exposed to Word a lot. But this is basically a publishing doc. For 99% of the people out there, Pages will work just fine. It's when you get into more desktop publishing thing, and a lot of things Pages will still do. There's other tools for that. I use Infinity. I'm not going to go over that in this video, but I pretty much use the whole Infinity line for graphics, design, etc. So this is basically Pages. You can dig into it deeper. This is what I use. Fairly intuitive. Basically, you've got your styles and all the things that you can do with things, and that will change depending on what context you have selected. All of the Mac apps do the same thing, so they all work very similar. Numbers. A couple things I like about Numbers. I think it is also easier to use. It does not have a row limit that I found, so you can load really big data sets in it. and it does just fine with big data sets, unlike Excel. LibreOffice is also another option. I don't use that. I have it installed. And the main reason I don't have it installed is because all of the Mac apps will allow you to export into any format you want. PDF, Excel, numbers will go to Excel, pages will go to Word docs. So you can pretty much cross back and forth between the Microsoft Office world. The only other exception is presentations. And Apple calls theirs Keynote. So this is Keynote. Let's pull up a big old one here. This is a fairly old Keynote. I haven't done a lot of presentations recently. This is a really old presentation I did at the rescue squad that I volunteer at. It was the chief at for several years. But the thing I liked about Keynotes is, one, it integrates with Apple. If you have an Apple TV, it's really easy to show your presentation. And editing, in my opinion, is superior. The video embedding works better. Everything just kind of works better. It does take a little bit of getting used to. I probably had quite a bit of bad habits that I learned in PowerPoint that don't exist in Keynote, and things that should have been super intuitive that I was struggling with and learned how to do in PowerPoint did not translate to Keynote, and I had to learn a new way of doing it. But in my opinion, it does more. It's faster, and it's way easier. Especially, like I say, if you have Apple TV and you have a phone that's Apple-based, you can pretty much load Keynotes on your phone, pair it with the Apple TV, and do your entire presentation from your phone. You don't even need your computer. You just need it stored in iCloud, and it just works. Okay, the next thing I want to go over is editors. You need a really good editor. I know there's a lot of Vim guys out there. There's really good solutions for Vim on Mac. I'm not a Vim person. I know enough to get by. But Visual Studio Code and Sublime, mostly Sublime is what I used. The only exception is I do like editing like style sheets and HTML elements in Visual Studio Code. So we'll kind of look at it real quick. Really simple interface. You basically have all your stuff over here. It's the same on every platform. So if you're coming from Windows already and you're going to use Visual Code or Visual Studio Code, you're going to be right at home. But this is, like I say, this is really a good text editor. A lot of people use this as their primary programming environment. They basically use the terminal and the text editor, and that's it. And I do that a lot as well. The other option is going to be Sublime. Again, another very popular text editor. Sublime I pretty much use for general editing. I've gotten a good habit, especially if you're in a terminal, you can do ST and then space file name, and it'll load Sublime up with that file. Or you can do STT, and that's part of that OMI ZSH extension. So you can do ST to open up a particular file, or you can be in a directory and just do STT, and it will open up the entire directory with a file browser built in Sublime. That's the main reason I like Sublime. It's very simple. It's got really good editing features. Refactoring is really good, and I use it a lot. Okay, so the next IDE that we're going to talk about is Xcode. That basically is free, and it's included with the Apple. You can download it and install. It is their development environment for anything iOS or anything Mac. I've got a project loaded up here. The navigation is really simple. If you're going to learn Objective-C or Swift, this is where you are likely to be if you're developing Mac apps. One of the benefits, and a lot of people don't use it, I do quite a bit. I've actually done quite a bit of SDL work for the radio controller that I did, so that's a graphical interface. And all that's done in SDL, which runs on Linux or any other platform. You can do Mean 3264 on Windows, and you can actually build an SDL app, which is what most games are written in. I used the SDL because I wanted a graphical interface for that radio console. But that I also do in Xcode. So Xcode will build things outside of the normal iOS Mac stuff, and it makes it really easy to test. More importantly, the debugger and everything works. If you're coming from just using an editor in GDB, Xcode will let you have that IDE and experience that's pretty good. And typically, years ago, really didn't like most IDEs because I felt that they got in the way. But Xcode does a fairly good job about not getting in the way and making your job easier, especially during debug. This particular project is a Swift project, and this is a field contact app that runs on iPhone. So this does everything from basically it's storing data locally, it's pushing data up to the cloud, it has a scanner interface, barcode interface, so quite a bit of stuff, and it's all written in Swift. The next IDE that we have up is, we'll look at Eclipse. So if you've watched my videos, all of the STM32 stuff that I've done has been done in Eclipse, and that's been done with the GNU ARM Eclipse plugin and using OpenOCD for debugging. And it's been a while since I've updated this. There's a much newer version. Yeah, I thought that was going to blow up. So I'll just go over that real quick. So Eclipse, I kind of like it because here lately it has been rolling upgrades on another one of the machines that I have. I've already upgraded this one, obviously, on those other machines. But it's done really well with the rolling upgrades. So basically what that means is you can really easily keep up with the IDE updates. The only thing is usually it's not backwards compatible. So your project file, once you upgrade your project file, it's hard to go back, or if not impossible. You can go in, I have went in and edited it way back when it didn't have a good continuous upgrade path. But now I find myself, I just upgrade it and never look back and really haven't had any problems. But Eclipse makes a great development platform for any of the TI MCU series. They do have their own code composer. They do have Mac versions of most of that. But you can also build that directly in the standard free Eclipse. You just download and install what plugins that you need. And you can build fairly easily inside of Eclipse. Probably the newest addition I've done, I've actually started using JetBrains probably about a year and a half ago. And I'm pretty much using their full suite of development tools. I'm just going to go over them really quick. So for embedded development, I do have some new stuff that I'm working on, both STM8, STM32. I'm using CLine. I do like CLine. It works really well. It stays completely out of the way. I really like using CMake. It integrates with CMake. So I can do, I can use Sublime and edit some code and build with CMake, or I can hop in with CLine if I've got to do some particular profiling or something like that. CLine has the same look and feel the rest of the JetBrains product. That's why I like it, because I can basically do everything and have like a common editor. But this is pretty standard. So this is a base STM32 project. It makes a lot of sense to me because I'm used to CMake, and it just out of the box works. You don't really get that necessarily with Eclipse. You can do it, but the default thing is actually going to have a workspace that's in Eclipse. It will generate the make file. You can set it up to generate like a CMake or a make file, but I found that to be non-intuitive if you do it that way. This way, you're basically you're managing the CMake file, and the IDE is staying out of the way, but it's giving you nice debugging, etc. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about has recently changed for me, and this is an IntelliJ product, and it's called DataGrip. And it basically, if you buy the whole suite of products, you will get all of those tools. What DataGrip is basically, for me, it replaced PHP MyAdmin, which I used a lot with MySQL databases. But also it will connect to a lot of other databases. Now, other products that I have used that are really good, that are really similar, SQL Pro is very good. Postgres makes a really nice Mac installable admin tool. But I have found that if you're using IntelliJ anyway, DataGrip makes the best database software development tool / admin tool / visual design. It also has diagramming that will generate a UML file. But I really like it. So some of the things you can do, like I've got Laravel, a database on here, and we can go down and do visualization. And sometimes, especially on a really big file, this will go really slow and that database may be empty, but basically it will generate a graphical representation, let you print that out, export it to a PNG, or you can also save this as the UML model and import that into another tool, or use plain UML or what have you to display what the database design looks like. Really useful tool. It's very similar to like all other tools, including Microsoft's SQL Enterprise Studio. One of the nice things is you can log into a Microsoft SQL with this. I don't know what database drivers I have, but we'll look and see. So there are the default drivers. There are actually more than this. It's quite inclusive of everything that I'm aware of. And then there's a lot more that you can add. The nice thing is it will let you add users and groups and roles and etc. in Microsoft. So if you deal with Microsoft, there's no Enterprise Studio solution really for Mac unless you do it in a VM. This allows you to do that without having to use a VM. Okay, I just want to really quickly cover like some of the tools that I use for a particular purpose, and for like systems programming stuff that's either running on the server or something that may just be running on my laptop to process some data or something like that. My go-to is Golang. Really easy to get set up on the Mac. You can install it with Homebrew. Again, IntelliJ makes GoLand. I'll show you that here in a sec. We'll actually get that loading up now. So the thing I like about Go is you can compile for all environments on every platform from your host platform as an executable. Now I also do have I've got a lot of legacy stuff hanging around. I used to use a lot of Python. I try not to do that now. Python's interpreted where Golang's compiled. And I found Golang to be much easier, faster to read and maintain than Python. There's nothing wrong with Python. You probably still need to know quite a bit about Python to be a software engineer, in my opinion. But Golang is what I choose to go to for all of my systems level stuff, or command line tools, etc. Let's see what this is. Okay, so this is just a test project. Really simple to do. You basically just build a configuration. If you were at the command line prompt, again, we're going to go back to iTerm. So GoLand doesn't get in your way. You can actually still go to the command prompt. You can either go here in the built-in terminal, which you'll notice that looks exactly like my iTerm 2, or you can actually go to the terminal and you can do go build the normal GoLand build commands. The IDE doesn't get in your way of that, which is really cool. Because a lot of times I will really quickly, especially if I already got Sublime open up, I'll open up that file, edit it, and do go build from the terminal, and I'll never open up GoLand. But this is like a systems programming. So the tools that I would use for that would be Sublime, GoLand if I'm really into it and it's something more complicated than I normally do, and obviously the terminal. And if you don't know what like systems type programming is, systems type programming would be you want to build a quick command tool, you want to build a scraper or something to get something started. It's not necessarily for general use, although I have built lots of things for general use. The Mux controller that I did, the programming for that, if I actually send a tool out to a customer to connect to that to program it, I've written all that in Golang. And the reason I did that is because I can build it here on my Mac, and then I can actually build all of the executable files for every flavor of Linux, 32 and 64-bit Windows, and just send them that file, and they can pick which platform they are, and I can be assured that it's going to run on their platform. So something really cool to note there about Go. Okay, what's super important to Mac survival, especially if you're coming from another thing, if you're coming from Windows, you're going to be attracted to the Finder that's in Mac. They each have their pros and cons. I typically don't really use Finder that much. I typically use the console. So if you're coming from Linux to Mac, it's going to be very similar, if not exactly the same, from the terminal. One of the tools that I use a lot is called Midnight Commander. If you remember back in the day, there was something called Norton Commander, And Midnight Commander is kind of a clone of that on Unix. I'm just going to show it to you here. It's installable via brew or homebrew. And this is kind of what it looks like. So you've got, a really simple navigation menu. You've got 2 panes, and you can copy, paste. It's got a menu up the top, so if you're not familiar with like Chown or anything like that, it kind of gives you a cheat sheet where you can do that really quickly. And it also has nice recursive options, so it makes it a little easier to understand what's about to happen. But I use this a lot. Another thing that I use typically for the Mac, and that's going to be up on your top menu bar, is the Spotlight search. So if I want to find, let's say that I want to load VS Code, you just type a couple of letters and it's going to pop up, and we can start that app directly from there. So that's file management, file navigation, etc. on the Mac. I recommend learning how to do the terminal method and using Spotlight for the majority of operations. Finder, usually I only use that if I'm installing an app or something. And Finder does work really well. There's a couple of concepts that you've got to kind of relearn, especially like the difference between copy and move. You want to pay particular attention to what's going on if you're coming from Windows. Okay, if you're doing web development, one of the things you're going to need is some kind of RESTful API test tool. I have switched to Paw, it's P-A-W. I also still do use Postman just a little bit. That's also available on the OS X platform. However, I found that Paw is a little more intuitive to use. It's easier. And the big thing I like is it actually integrates directly in with iCloud, and you can basically share. And it doesn't matter what machine I go to. If I've saved that as an iCloud project, I can get to it. And I have several machines that I bounce back and forth. The interface is pretty easy. Basically, you've got generic stuff. It will generate you some documentation. It's fairly easy to get this back out as a Swagger representation if you need it for documentation, etc., which is probably likely. So this works really good for web development. So this would be used if you had your back end built and you want to test to see what RESTful API calls that you built, do they actually work and do they return the data. It's really good for exploratory as well. It does save all the results, so that's real handy, especially if you a lot of times I'll find myself connected to an API that may be difficult. Maybe it's through a VPN or something like that, and you really want to capture some data and then leave that network and work on it a little bit and come back to it. It doesn't. So once you grab those requests, it stores them all and you can go back and look at them again. Really convenient feature. So Paw and Postman both are really good tools. I find myself using Paw the most for that type of work. Okay, another tool that I use quite a bit, especially for like generating header comments or documentation that is in code. I do use Markdown a lot for like README, etc., along with Mermaid inside of the Markdown for systems documentation or like documentation that's actually in a docs file. But this is for documentation in code and a couple of other purposes, especially if you have command line. The program's called MonoDraw, and basically it's an ASCII art editor, I guess is the best way to put it. So you can do things like add in things that are fixed width type spacing that will show up on a screen. You can copy and paste this, you can export it, you can turn on or off Unicode support. So this would be something really handy for putting pretty diagrams or adding a little flair to your comments inside of the code. But I find myself using this quite a bit, especially for code documentation. It does some really neat stuff. It will also do ASCII art, so that's where a lot of the ASCII art that you see is done. It's in this program. Again, that's called MonoDraw. Another thing that comes up a lot, and I hate having to install Adobe Reader in Windows these days because it comes with a lot of other stuff that you don't want to necessarily install. Well, on a Mac, I don't even use Adobe. The built-in preview app pretty much will do what you need to do in PDFs. It's really easy to get to. Let's get this closed down here. And it's called the preview app. It's on every app or every Mac that's out there. And it doesn't just do PDFs. It does pretty much any kind of image, file, etc. And it works really well for PDFs in general, as well as any other file that you would want to open. The nice thing is it's integrated with the operating system, so it makes it a little bit easier to use. It's one less thing to install, one less thing to keep up with. Okay, so in closing out this video, I'm just really quickly going to go over the high-level stuff of the actual, if you wanted to build something, what would I use on top of what I'm using on the Mac. So we'll start off with, if I'm doing like simple APIs that are web-based or simple web application, probably my go-to is going to be Swift Vapor or Laravel in PHP. Typically, a lot of people will write really simple, especially administrative apps and stuff, using a multi-tier approach, and it's just not cost-effective. It's not as rapid. It's not rapid applications development. So if you're building, a Maven Tomcat Spring API, that has a lot of overhead to keep up with development, and you're using like Vue or React or Angular as the front end, and then writing another mobile app on top of that, you will find that if it's not a million user system and you're just building this maybe for yourself or for just a small number of people, and by small number of people I mean maybe like 10,000, PHP is going to out accelerate as far as development time goes anything else out there. Swift is really good too. That gets you into something that's actually compiled and compact, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. I have built some stuff in Golang, and I do like Golang, but I typically keep that reserved for systems programming. Just simply the fact that there's some things about Gen in particular I don't like. Maybe there's another framework out there that I need to look at, but Gen is what I've been using for API development. Laravel I really like because it gives you a really good quick base to get user authentication with two-factor, the whole 9 yards, without really writing any code, and you can actually focus on the application parts. Next would be like mobile development. So I have written some things in React prior. Some of the rescue tools that I did, I attempted to launch a successful project in React and was not real happy. I know that both stores, Android and Apple, kind of shadow ban a lot of React stuff. So I have went pretty much exclusively to only building iOS stuff. And when I do build something on Android, I try to do it in a native environment. So both tools, Xcode for Mac and Android Studio, also runs on Mac, is what I would use to actually, do a mobile deployment. I have found that trying to take the shortcut of one environment that will build both, you always end up with, taking some concessions on something, either with the device support or something that makes it very difficult, and it would have actually been quicker. Usually writing the code is not the time-consuming thing. The figuring out how you want it to work and making it work is usually the time-consuming thing. So having two versions of code, just for me personally, seems to be a much better use of time, and you get full access to the device and can do anything on that particular platform. More importantly, iOS and Android don't necessarily look the same, so trying to do like React-based apps, etc., on both, neither one really, you don't get the feel of the platform that you're on if you're doing a React app, and that to me is a negative. I mentioned this before. If I was doing any kind of systems programming, especially like simple API stuff, Golang would be my first choice. Python would be my second. If you're building a really complex, scalable app, you can pretty much use whatever backend meets your needs. Probably the most standard is probably going to be a Spring Boot style backend with an Angular front end. Newer technologies, all of the Spring Boot and everything's been out there for a while. Newer things, in my opinion, that work better. I am pretty much a fan of Swift Vapor. If you haven't checked that out, I did write a few of my backends in Katara, which is an IBM thing, and I think it's been discontinued or taken over. But when that happened, I switched to Vapor, and I really like it. It's got a simple model, it's easy to use, and there's lots of plugins. The only downside to Vapor, and the only reason I don't use it everywhere, is right now there's no existing Microsoft SQL connector. Now there is a Swift library to interface, but you have to do your own Fluent driver, and that was just too much work to have to maintain both the application and have to write a driver and keep that up. Database wise, typically I stick to something in the MySQL flavor if at all possible. So that would be MariaDB, AWS Aurora database, etc. It's all kind of the same protocol as far as connecting and various levels of performance, but the code will connect no matter what. So I try to stick to that. I try to not use Microsoft. I'm not a real big fan of having to keep a Microsoft SQL server. But again, lots of systems already have that out there, and that's just what you have to deal with. I hope you liked the video, and hopefully this gives you some information to get started. That's the intent of the video, is just to kind of give you a quick overview so that you know what to look for, what to download, or what to kind of explore. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.